Live from Joe's mom's basement, it's the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and today, when you're giving people advice, what's the difference between what you tell beginners versus what you share with more advanced financial savers? Today, we'll ask our roundtable team featuring financial independence coach Bernadette Joy and her microphone. And joining her from this podcast, it's the man with a financial plan, OG. And finally, fresh off her amazing Thanksgiving halftime show appearance, it's Dolly Parton. Nah, it's just Len Penzo, but don't worry, he's still wearing the cheerleader outfit. And that's not all. Halfway through the show, I'll share my extorting trivia question. Extortioning, we're going with that. And now, a guy who couldn't be bribed to stop bringing you the best personal finance advice, it's Joe Saul-Sehy.
Who would want to do that? Who would want a suboptimal advice, right? Hey, everybody. I am Joe Saul-Sehy, Average Joe Money on Twitter, on X, on Threads, on whatever, name the social channel. But we are there. And man, do we have a great roundtable today because we have the woman who's your favorite rich auntie. It's about time we had her here, Bernadette Joy. It's about time you're here, Bernadette, to save this show.
Thank you so much, and thank you for letting me use this giant microphone for a reason.
For people not watching on YouTube, they might not know that we've got a beautiful pink microphone in front of Bernadette.
It's bigger than my snowman.
Is that your microphone, or are you just happy to be here?
I know, that's what I was thinking too. I was thinking that too.
For the three people, Bernadette, that don't know your story, let's get this straight. Did you really pay off over $300,000 of debt?
In 3 years, yes, I did.
3 years.
Yeah, my husband and I decided a couple of years ago that we didn't want to be on that roller coaster that is called financial education student loans. And so we decided that we were just going to do something different. And we started off with paying off $72,000 of student loans in a year.
Wow.
And then we're like, well, what do we do next? What would happen if we paid off everything, including our house? And lo and behold, 3 years later, we were completely debt-free in our 30s. And that's what started us on the financial independence journey.
And then very quickly after that, not that long after that, you said this publicly, you became a millionaire.
I became a millionaire, yes. And it's a little weird to say that publicly, but I decided that, for myself growing up in a kind of immigrant family and money being kind of a very scarce topic, I decided, you know what? I think more people should be celebrative of what they've accomplished. So I say it loud and proud, and I hope that it encourages other women to, not shy away from what they've accomplished.
We gotta have you back another time to dive into like the debt payoff strategy, because as you know, this comes out in December. A lot of people getting into debt right now. If there's one thing that was like the biggest thing to paying off all that debt quickly, what would you say the number one thing for people, our stackers, to take away would be?
I would say that the number one thing that helped me personally get out of debt was to just bite the bullet and pay off that first lowest balance immediately, like as soon as I decided it. And that really just triggered the momentum for fast forward. So in my case, I had like $72,000 of student loans, but it was broken up over like 6 or 7 different loans. Yeah. And I had cash in the bank that was sitting there not really doing anything for me. And so I bit the bullet and just like paid off that first loan. And I was like, wait, I didn't die. Let's see what else happens.
It's funny. I mean, you're joking, but you're not joking. People have that feeling. They're like, wait a minute, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can do it.
Mm-hmm. Especially for people who are used to having X amount of contingency fund or emergency fund and kind of follow that traditional advice of like, you have to have 3 to 6 months of emergency funds. But nowadays, like you said, a lot of people are going to debt right now. A lot of people don't even have enough savings for, a $400 emergency. Yeah. And what I realized was there's a lot of people that I've met who are holding on to cash and they don't really know why, while at the same time holding on to significant debt. And so I say for me, I was one of those people who thought, I was going to be doing well if I had money saved up in the bank, even though I had this debt all the way on the other side. And so I started shifting things over, and it really changed the trajectory of my finances.
It's a fabulous story. And by the way, if you want to hear Bernadette talk to lots of people with inspirational stories, just pause right now and subscribe to her podcast, the Crush Your Money Goals podcast. I know you guys just finished a new season of that, another season of the show. And that's...
Well, I took a note from you guys. I decided to bring on a co-host, and this is the first season that I did that, and she's awesome. And she is based out of Portugal, Steph Gonzalez, and she's smarter than I am. So I learned from...
Yeah,
I learned different people smarter than me.
It's going to help Bernadette a little bit, but until you get an announcer, it's just not really going to take off until you get the announcer.
That's right. That is the key. We met Steph. I met Steph at FinCon. Had a nice chat with Steph, and just a fantastic co-host. Let's talk about who else is here on this roundtable with you. First of all, my co-host, Mr. OG, joining us. You got the not OG look going right now. It looks like maybe a wannabe look, maybe. I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, I'm trying out new things to see how it lands.
Model our idols.
Yeah. Imitation is the highest form of flattery, from what I understand.
For our audio listeners, the majority of people, OG just put on a cap, which might look a little bit like the gentleman in his bunker under Los Angeles. Mr. Len Penzo is here. How are you, man?
I am great. And I guess we're talking about advice today, right? So I got to tell you, I did get some advice once from a financial advisor. I considered going to one, and I thought I'd stop in his office. So I asked him, I said, where should I put my money? And he told me to put it on booze. And I was like, booze? Why should I put it on booze? And you know what he told me?
I have no idea.
He said, where else can you get 40%? 80 proof is 40%, folks. That's
I got it.
I'm sorry I had to
you didn't need to explain it. It was good.
That's how
We just weren't laughing.
This was nothing there, Len. It was just zero for that. Wait a minute, hold on.
At least put a sound effect in there, would you?
There it was. He's here all week. It doesn't get better, Bernadette. Sorry, it does not get better.
Good to know.
We've got Bernadette Joy here. We got OG. We got Len Penzo. We got Neighbor Doug. We're going to talk about advanced discussions on money versus beginner discussions on money. So let's go. Oh, wait a minute. Before we go, we can't go yet. Bernadette, we haven't read you the rules yet. We got to give you the rules. Do you know the rules?
It didn't feel like a show that had rules, but okay, we'll go with that.
Yeah. After Len's joke, who has
I'm sorry.
Which, by the way, brings up rule number 1.
Laugh at Len's joke, even if it's not that funny. Got it. That's rule number 1.
Yes. Wait for rule number 2. It's even better.
Okay. So rule number 2 is I gotta laugh at anyone's jokes here, even if they're not funny. But if they're wearing a hat, that makes it okay.
Yes. Which, wait a minute.
Well, wait a minute.
See what you did there?
One of us not wearing
that means
a hat.
you all violated the first rule then, because nobody laughed.
There it was. Oh boy. We've got Bernadette here. We've got Len. We got OG. We got jokes. We got Doug. Let's go. Our piece today comes to us from a Forte Labs. This was half of the inspiration for today's discussion, written by Tiago Forte, the crucial difference between beginner and advanced advice. And I thought about this partly because there was a big time discussion on the internet a couple weeks ago where Mr. Dave Ramsey came out with a statement saying that a safe withdrawal rate for a retirement portfolio is 8%. And the way he got there was math. He said, hey, if your mutual funds do 12%, and you have a 4% conservatively inflation rate, that means there's 8% between those two, and you could just take the rest out. And the internet world exploded saying this is horrible advice, including us. What's funny is I know there's a bunch of people out there, though, Bernadette, who are saying, what's a withdrawal rate? Like, what the hell are you nerds talking about? Like, that was really, in the big scheme of things, Bernadette, that was a very advanced kind of argument and beyond. I bet there's a ton of people that have no idea what people were arguing about.
Yeah, I've encountered that myself, and what I kind of follow this discussion also, and what I think is really interesting is that there was a lot of people who I'll say this: there's a lot of people who have opinions about it who haven't even really considered what withdrawal actually might look like, and or have not gotten to the point where they have to start even thinking or experience that. And so when I say that is that I've often seen a lot of folks who are not even close to retirement or thinking about retirement in the near future, or don't have enough money to retire, and then have opinions about that. Whereas for myself as a financial coach, I've been working a lot with people who are maybe 5 to 10 years out, closer to retirement, and they don't understand what a withdrawal rate is, and they are the ones that need to know what a withdrawal rate is. And so I think, I love that we're talking about this topic of beginner versus advanced advice, because there's a lot of conversations that are happening both ways, like people who are taking beginners who are taking advanced advice that they shouldn't be, and people who are advanced who are kind of perpetuating a beginner advice just regardless of where people are at in their journey.
Yeah, and this piece from Forte Labs, and we'll link to it in the show notes at Stacky Benjamins. You truly don't need to read it to follow along in this discussion. But this piece, Len, begins with, a lot of people want to skip the beginner stuff, right? And especially when they hear half the internet blow up around Dave Ramsey's rant a couple weeks ago, and they just want to go to the advanced stuff. What's the downside of skipping the basics and just going right to the advanced planning options?
Well, if you go to the advanced planning options, that kind of intimates that you understand, you have a good grasp of what you're trying to get the advice for in the first place. So if you don't really understand the subject matter, the advanced advice can actually do more harm than good, because it requires you to understand yourself, and understand what you need and what you want, and you have to know how to act on it. I mean, it's just like anything else. You need to crawl before you walk, and walk before you run. And it's just, there's certain things that are in the financial world. People will tell you to do things like, for example, investing. Why don't you invest in options? You can make more money quicker by investing in options instead of putting something into stocks, right? But options, and I still, after all these years, I still do not understand how options work at all. But one thing I do know is you can lose a lot of money extremely quickly if you don't know what you're doing, and you just, you go and put some money down on some option, and before you know it, I mean, you can lose a lot of money very fast. I don't understand it, so I stay away from it. But there are, if you really know your stuff, I mean, then maybe options will work. But like I said, it requires a lot of internal knowledge on yourself before you can advance on any advanced advice.
Yeah, I know. In your financial planning practice, I mean, how often have you seen people making investment choices where they really need to be more advanced? And I'll give you an example from when I was an advisor. I remember meeting with a client, and she had all these bonds that she had just bought from a broker. And she said, well, look at this bond's paying 7%. But she paid, and this is where we're going to get advanced, guys, she paid above par value, which completely made the 7% coupon rate that it said on paper. Again, we're going to advanced land, zero. Like these bonds weren't going to really make her any money at all. And she didn't understand that. She just looked at, it says 7% on this bond, so this sounds like a good deal.
I think this is very interesting, because I feel like for the vast majority of people, the simplest stuff is probably the right answer. And very rarely do you run into the scenario where the most advanced or the most complicated scenario or the most complicated advice turns into, something to spend a lot of time and energy on. I was thinking about pension calculations. On Monday, we talked about pension calculations or stream of income versus a lump sum, and you get in some very complicated decision making around beneficiaries and life expectancy and all of the different things. But a lot of that boils down to deciding between revocable choices and irrevocable choices. Like, can you undo this if you don't like it in the future? And when it comes to financial decisions or thinking about financial choices, I think it really needs to be kind of looked at through that lens. If this is something that I can change, then totally make the simple choice. Invest simply, or like Len was talking about, or pay your debt off, or just those simple things. You don't have to get overly complicated with it. But when it gets to something that's an irrevocable choice, once you make this choice, you can never make another choice again. I think then it makes sense to make sure that you spend a lot of time and energy going through all of the different combinations and permutations of that decision, because you truly get one choice or one time to make that decision. But a lot of times we get wrapped up in, I want to make the complicated decision. I want to do the fun stuff I see on Instagram, or the fun stuff I see on TikTok, or god awful Reddit or something like that. And it's like, no, the simplest thing is, just invest money. Like, don't touch it for 30 years. You'll be rich. You don't have to get creative. Just do the easy stuff.
Well, and OG Bernadette brings up a great point, which is, the advanced stuff leads people to think, I just need more information before I move. When you were paying off your $300,000 and you actually pulled the trigger on doing that, and quote, it didn't kill you, right? How much of that was having the right information, and how much of that was just getting started?
Oh, I love that you pose it that way. I had no information. So it was 0% information and 100%. I just need to do something to feel like I am making a move here. And I think one of the real challenges of taking on advanced strategies in money in particular, before you really did the beginner steps, is it puts a lot of people into analysis paralysis, where they're like, let me go learn more. Let me go learn more. Let me go listen to 100 different gurus about what they have to say about this before I even start doing something. And one of the things that I often tell people is just like, you have to start like today. Just do something. And that beginner, like OG said, like the beginner step is probably not gonna steer you in the wrong direction unless you're doing something super crazy, which in that case, it's not really beginner, is it?
Well, the cool thing for you too was every move you made truly was revocable. Like when he was talking about, there was, even if you'd made a mistake, Bernadette, it wasn't going to kill you.
Well, here's what I think is interesting, and I thought about this a lot, is I get a lot of students in my programs who make it feel like it's life or death, like on fire kind of decisions for this type of stuff. And I had to peel back, well, why are they acting that way? Why are they acting that way? And, really a lot of it came to what Len said of like knowing yourself, but also knowing where your beliefs around money came from, where that you're thinking to the point of like, wow, if I put $1,000 in my Roth IRA, like that's going to be a huge mistake. Like that's a pretty big overreaction, I think, right? And if we know about Roth IRAs, like you can actually just pull it out again if you really want, if you really wanted to, and there's not going to be a penalty on it. So what I realized was that a lot of where people's, especially beginners, are getting stalled from moving forward in their financial journeys is because they are attaching this life or death kind of mentality to these decisions, and it likely came from them. Somewhere along the line, someone told them like, if you lose the money, it's never coming back.
Well, and I think that's a great point that Bernadette makes, Len. I feel like if we start at that advanced level, we're much more likely to get confused and in the weeds, which means we're more likely then to make a mistake. And then I think a big part of this game is confidence, don't you?
Confidence in knowing what you want to do, in other words?
A, what you want to do, and B, that, hey, I made a move and it didn't kill me. Like, let's take your example of options, right?
Yeah.
I go into the option market, I start there. It's so easy to mess up the options market. Like that's a place where it's very easy to screw yourself. And so you do that. And instead of feeling more confident making the next move, you retreat and go into your shell because, hey, you messed it up and you lost 500, 1,000, or, maybe even more money.
Yeah. And you might never go back to it again, even when you get smarter and you actually do have the chops to actually go ahead and do that. So that is true. Now, there's another opposite side to that too, is let's say you take some advanced advice, but you really don't understand. You don't understand it, all the nuances still, but you get lucky. And it works out, but it worked out for the wrong reasons. Now you've got false security there, and you might go work further down the road and make another move based on that advanced advice that it really bites you in the butt. So again, walk before you run. You got to be careful. I mean, there's also the downside to the beginner's advice too. And I don't know if we're not talking about the beginner's advice, but there are pitfalls to beginner's advice too. Okay, so for example, the beginner's advice can be so simplistic that doesn't help you either. Now, I guess everybody's got to start somewhere, but for example, what's a classic? One of the classics, I think, is, how much stock should you have in your portfolio? And what's the old rule of thumb? It's subtract your age from 100, right? Something like that. So if you're in your 20s, you put 80% in. Well, I mean, that's a good start, but perhaps that's even too conservative. Who's to say that when you're in your early 20s, when you have plenty of time in front of you, why not put even more than 80%? I see no issue potentially going with 90 or 100%, especially if you understand the risks involved. So it's a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. You got to be careful in both respects. So.
Well, and I think you bring up a great point, because, one thing I've always thought is using those rules of thumb in the first place. We call that beginner advice. And I've always pushed back and said, I think that's a stupid place to start. The fact that so many people push that, Len, is beginner advice, where I think the perfect place to start is actually, and it sounds difficult, which I guess that's a good question. Does it make this beginner or advanced advice? I think if you're a beginner, starting with the end in mind is the perfect place to start, right? Begin with, what do I want? And then instead of some stupid rule of thumb, like and yet I've gotten pushback from people who have said, no, without the rules of thumb, people won't even start. Like, I need a rule of thumb to get started. I think the rules of thumb too often can lead you astray. I don't like that.
I know, but that's the key. Okay, so use that as a baseline, as a benchmark. But you've got, again, we go back to know yourself. Okay, there's your benchmark. Why? How does that apply to you? Does it make sense for you? Here's another one. Like, make sure your house, your mortgage is no more than three times your take-home pay or something like that. It's like a third. It shouldn't be more than that. But it's so broad, and it doesn't take into account certain things. I mean, if you're making a lot of money, young in age, and let's say you're making well into six figures, maybe $100,000, $120,000, $130,000, and let's say you get you get a nice interest rate to start or whatever. I mean, that might not apply at all. Maybe you can afford 40% of your income right away, or 45 just to start. I mean, because you have so much excess income, you don't necessarily have to hold yourself to that rule of thumb. You have to just use that as a benchmark, and then kind of know yourself and apply how that applies to you. So.
Oh, gee, rules of thumb versus beginner advice, or do you think rules of thumb are truly beginner advice?
I guess I would say that they probably are a starting point. I don't think that all of them are bad, and I honestly think that the way that I look at kind of the generic idea of a rule of thumb type of financial decision is you're just trying to point the boat in the right direction. Are we going west or north? Like, we're not trying to get exactly the degrees right. We're just trying to literally row in the right direction for now, and then we'll fine tune it later. Here's one. You should contribute the first amount of money from savings, or for your savings, should be to your employer match contribution. Otherwise, you're, quote, giving away free money. I think that's perfectly fine. And for somebody who's starting out and going, should I save 5%, 10%, 30%? I don't know. What's the number should I pick? I think that's a great place to start and say, well, at least I'm going to do that, because we know that if you did that for the next 40 years, you'd be fine. And so we've got a hierarchy of where to save and that sort of stuff. I think is a totally fine way to do it. But very quickly you have to transition from that, to your point, Joe, and go, all right, now we've got at least people rowing in the right direction, or my money going in the right direction. I need to spend some time here and and decide what's best for me. The reality is that when you're 20 or 30 or 40, a lot of times you don't have any idea what you want to do in the future. I mean, 20 years is a long freaking time.
I think you're talking about two different things, though, G. I think I think on one hand, you're talking about order of operations, which I like. Yeah. Do this generally first, this generally second, this generally third, versus just a rule of thumb, which is some of the stuff Len's talking about, like a third of your money toward your house or only so much toward, whatever that might be.
Yeah, for 50, 30, 20 spending plan.
Yeah, those things. Bernadette, order of operations versus rules of thumb. What do you think?
I do believe that there should be an order of operations when it comes to certain things. On my platform, I'm pretty stringent about telling people I don't think you should be investing if you have 27% interest credit card debt. I think there's an order of operations on that. Yeah. But I will say that I myself have been susceptible to rules of thumb that were not good for me. And so a prime example I will say right now is there's a lot of rules of thumb of what you should be doing at every age. So there's all these articles that are at 20s, you should be doing this. And in your 30s, you should be doing this. And in 40s, you should be doing this. And where I got caught up on it was that my retirement plan, even though I'm 38, really looks more like a 55-year-old's right now, because I've been able to accumulate enough investments to retire early. And so when I was looking at what I should be doing at 30 something, I ended up making some decisions that really didn't make sense for my situation. And I also think that with the rules of thumb, I loved, what we're talking about here is that, you have to be able to understand. And I love the analogy of the boat of a rules of thumb is your basic guide map, right? Here's where you're going. We're going in the right direction. Yeah. But if a storm comes, if pirates try to take over your ship, you got to be able to ditch the map and figure out what you're doing next. And I think that's where we talk about advanced advice.
It's an amazing coincidence, Bernadette, because I'm 38 too, but my body looks 55. So it's really, that's weird.
Wow, something's starting to stink down here I don't know what it is. I think that's a great place to leave it. What I'd love to do in the second half after we take a little break for our trivia competition is let's talk about basic tips in different areas of your financial plan, whether it's getting out of debt, saving for retirement, risk management. What's a great basic tip that you guys like? And then what is a great advanced tip? What's kind of the 201 for all this? But before we get to that, as I alluded to, we are in the last 3 weeks of our year-long trivia competition. And by the way, remember how last year, Len, we had a cake that OG made us watch him eat from Milk Bar? Remember that?
I remember that cake.
And Stacker Eric filled in after we had a guy at the beginning of the year say, I'd love to have a cake. I'd love if there were a cake. And then that dude disappeared. We wrote him over and over and over about, hey, man, it's cake time. And he just, no, thank you. I don't know. Sniffed us on the cake. But then Stacker Eric in Detroit stepped up, who's a wonderful man. And last year said, well, guess what? He wrote me again yesterday and said, Joe, I would love to donate a cake again for the winner. So, and Bernadette's like, wait a minute, there's cake?
There's cake?
I can see the look on her face. If Paula wins, Bernadette, you got to go to her and say, hey,
I claim this cake.
Yeah, I get part of your cake, Pant. Come on. Bernadette, speaking of that, you're playing on team Paula Pant, which means I've got good news and bad news for you here with 3 weeks to go. Do you want the good news first or the bad news?
Bad news.
Well, the bad news is that Paula's got to run the table to force a tie because she's got 13 points and Len is in first place with 16. So she's got to win this week, next week, and the week after for her to actually have any chance at the cake.
Okay. Done. I'm going to win. I already know.
Duh, of course. The good news, though, Bernadette, is that you are going to be in the driver's seat today because you get to guess last. You get to hear what everybody else is guessing. Len will guess first because he's got 16. OG last week with our special 2-pointer pulled it within 15 points. So, man, 16
tied.
for Len.
I thought I tied it up last week.
No, you had 13 and you scored 2 points. So you are at 15.
Where's the official record of this? Is this a Google Doc of some kind? I feel like
talk to producer Karen. Talk to producer
Saw the
Karen.
Slack channel. Karen didn't know what was happening either.
16, 15, 13 is our
Splice
score.
of rolls. What is happening?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll verify that, but one thing we do know is this is one of the more exciting years we've ever had because we're in the fourth quarter. There's just a couple of minutes left, and OG's hoping for
Ready
that
to hit a home run.
interception by the
It's coming
Michigan
down.
defensive back.
Whoever has
to
the
seal
ball
the
last
deal.
is going to win this. That's how it's going to work.
Well, you know what? To have a winner, we need a question. Doug, what is today's trivia question?
Here we go. Hey there, stackers. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. You know, speaking of advice, one piece of advice I got early in life was don't join the mob. But that's always been tough advice to follow because, you know, I've always been a big fan of mafia movies, especially The Godfather. Not to brag, but I read the book before I saw the movie. Rumor has it that the character Johnny Fontaine was based on Frank Sinatra, who many people believe had his career resurgence because of his alleged ties to the mafia. Sinatra was furious about the rumor and threatened the author of the novel, Mario Puzo, even though Puzo insisted that he hadn't intended for the character to be based on Frank. After the confrontation, the character of Johnny Fontaine was reduced to a much smaller part, but the legend remains today. Frank likely wanted to protect his clean image, as his kids were all adults by the time the movie came out, and it could have soured their opinion of their father. Frank Sinatra Jr. had already been through enough by then, having been kidnapped when he was a teenager. Which brings us to today's trivia question. Frank Sinatra's son was kidnapped on this day in 1963. How much was the ransom? I'll be back right after I pick up some cannoli.
There is a great, and I'm not even gonna say good. There is a great TV series I highly recommend. The bad news is it is on. Where do we figure out it's on?
Paramount Plus.
It's on Paramount Plus.
Oh,
I know, which I think like 3 people subscribe to that thing. But it stars Miles Teller, and it is the true story. It's called The Offer. It's the true story of how the Godfather movies got made, and it is surreal. Some of the stuff that happened. It's a phenomenal. So if you cancel some of your other subscriptions for a little bit, grab Paramount Plus and watch The Offer. Highly recommend it.
stop.
All right, Len, you are up first, man. Frank Sinatra Jr. on today's date in history was kidnapped. How much was the ransom?
Did you say on this date in history?
Yes.
On this date in 1963, Frank
Thank
Sinatra
you,
Jr. was
1963.
kidnapped.
Oh, that's a good one. Well, inflation, right? So what would a ransom be?
Then you gotta make him an offer they can't refuse.
See, that was funny. That was funny. I like that one.
Every once in a while, Bernadette. Every once in a while.
You never come to me as a friend.
That was good. I'm impressed.
Oh, Lordy.
You just take your time, Len. I mean, whenever it's good for you.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know.
Clearly.
That part we get.
You know, I
He
don't
really thinks he's going to get this right. This is, I think that, right? Is this what normally happens?
This is serious shit, Bernadette.
Okay. He is in the lead, right?
This is a 2-time winning trophy that he's trying to steal.
I want to say something like $10 million, but the inflation, I mean, $10 million back then was like just ridiculous. I mean, so I'm going to say, I think it's significantly less. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say it's less than $1 million just because of inflation. I'm going to say $250,000.
250.
$250,000.
I think that's from 1963. I think that's a lot of dough.
Okay, final answer. He's not allowed to change, right?
He is not allowed to change. He's locked in. OG, what do you think of 250,000?
So my question, I have a question, and maybe this is allowed or not. May I know?
He always has a question.
May I know the age of Frank Sinatra Jr. upon the kidnapping?
Oh, that is a good question.
Because I can't really frame out like how old Frank Sinatra was during that time.
If we let you know, then we have to let Len, if he wants to amend his guess.
I deny that request. We're not telling him.
Request denied. Okay.
Oh,
Yes.
All right. So Frank Sinatra, 1963.
It's pretty hardcore, Bernadette.
I did not know this.
Yeah. When was he? He seems like somebody that might have been born in the teens, maybe 20s.
Wait a minute. Did you say Frank Sinatra? Frank Sinatra didn't get kidnapped. Did you said Frank Sinatra Jr.?
I'm trying to figure out how old his kid would be.
We said
Settle down.
Okay, never mind.
He's reverse engineering his age is what he's trying to do.
I don't understand.
Because I know Joe was.
He's pretending
How old
like
was
he's
Joe in
analytical.
1963?
Easy. Stop it.
No? Okay.
Stop it. I'm just standing right here.
So he's maybe
Joe,
like
was it
80?
sunny or cloudy that day when it
I'm going to
happened?
say this was a botched. This whole thing was like just a botched thing. It was. They didn't know who they were getting. They just randomly grabbed some dude.
The mafia, the mob, they're pretty precise on that kind of stuff.
But Len's thinking that this is actually people know what's up. This is a child's play. $50,000. This is hardly anything.
50,000. All right, Bernadette, on one hand, you got 250, you've got 50. Where are you putting the guess?
1963. Okay. I'm going to tell you why I think this.
I thought that was your answer, 1,900. Yeah.
I'll bet.
Like, wow, that was
amazing,
quick.
Right? So before all of the thinking here, I already had an answer in mind. So I'm going to go high on this, and I'm going to say 300,000. I was originally going to say 500,000, but I'm going to 300,000. And I say this because one, it's the mob. Two, like, why would they do anything for less than that amount of money? Two, it was Frank Sinatra's son. So this is not like a ambassador or like a government official or whatever. It's like someone legit famous back then. Like that's like our Justin Timberlake or Justin Bieber back in the day.
Right.
And I'm going to say that if it was good enough to make the news or like that people knew about it, then it had to be a good amount of money. So I'm going to go with 300K.
300K. So we've got 300,000 from Bernadette. We've got 50,000 from the OG, and we got 250 from Len. Guess what? We're going to let you know who the winner is right after this. All right, Len, you kicked it off with 250,000, and Bernadette gave you a little room on the top, and OG gave you a heck of a lot of room on the bottom. You feeling good?
No, I don't know. I think it's less than $1 million, but I don't know. I have no idea where it's at somewhere, what they're going to ask for Frank Sinatra Jr.'s kid. So I don't know.
No, Frank Sinatra's kid. It's Frank Sinatra's kid who is Frank Sinatra Jr.
Yeah, Frank Sinatra Jr.'s kid would get nothing. I mean,
yeah, that's
they
right.
wouldn't pay anybody.
It's not Frank Sinatra's grandkid. It's Frank Sinatra's kid.
Oh. Well, then I really don't feel good at all. Then OG's got it. Then Bernadette's got it. Then Bernadette's
you think it should have been higher then?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Had you understood the question.
Yeah.
But OG, you were much lower at 50,000. How you feeling?
I think this is just some sort of random, crime of opportunity.
Oh.
I don't know who I don't know how old he was. Doug, 8-year-old on the side of the street. They snap him up and they're going, "Hey, I'm going to ransom this kid off." They just some low-level criminal and not being able to tie all those things together. So,
Doug, is he implying that some of this competition might have some randomness attached to it? Is that what he's trying to imply?
I think he is hinting around the edges of that.
I think maybe there just might be a touch of randomness. But Bernadette, Len thinks you might have it.
Honestly, I think I have it too, but I'm just overly confident in anything related to trivia.
I'd rather you have it than OG, because if OG gets it, then we're tied. So.
All right. Is Team Bernadette / Paula still in the competition? If Bernadette's right, they are. If Len gets it, he pulls ahead. OG can force a tie.
He's dormy.
Doug, Well, who's got it?
Hey there, stackers. I'm Italian food lover and cement bootmaker, Joe's mom's neighbor Doug. His rumored connections to the mob notwithstanding, Frank Sinatra was known for his legendary temper, which made it all the more surprising that one of his kids could be the target of a kidnapping. Surely the singer and actor would have more than harsh words in store for anyone who attempted to hurt his family and extort him. Today's trivia question is, Frank Sinatra's son, Frank Jr., was kidnapped on this day in 1963. How much was the ransom? The answer? Frank Sinatra Jr. was snatched out of his dressing room by 3 of his former classmates while he was on tour at the age of 19. There's your answer, OG. The perpetrators contacted the elder Sinatra the following evening to demand a ransom that in today's dollars was equal to $2.3 million, or in 1963, $190,000 more than what OG guessed, $60,000 less than what Bernadette guessed, and $10,000 less than what Len guessed. It was $240,000, edging Len just a little bit closer to that coveted crappy trophy.
He's got it, Dormy. I should have done. I
am devastated. I'm devastated.
Bernadette, we screwed this up. We needed to just sandwich him and just go somebody at 249 and somebody at 251.
You should have colluded.
Yes.
That's not the proper way to play this game.
The proper way is to do it the old school way, where if you're over, you're out. So I would have won.
I will say, OG, your formal request for an audit on the scores over the year has been submitted appropriately. We've deemed, and so we will take a look at what the accurate and actual score was going into today's competition, because it's close enough. We want to go to video replay and get this right, just like we would in the NFL.
Because it could matter. It could be over right now.
I hope that recount gives me an extra one, and then we're no longer dormy.
That's what I mean.
Win.
Like, it could be over. We could have the last 3 weeks or 2 weeks. But Len, you're dormy now. The best I can hope for is tying you, which tie goes to the current champion, I believe.
Unless you were already tied.
We actually have a tiebreaker in mind that we'll share that happens. If that happens, we do have a tiebreaker.
Nudity.
I win.
That's like
promises, Joe.
Next year.
I'm so mad that I lost that question, to be honest. I've been listening to what you guys have been saying for the last 5 minutes.
You were so close. Close. Nice job. Hey, let's move back to the serious stuff. The second half of our discussion about beginner advice versus advanced advice is brought to you by depositaccounts.com. Bernadette, you know what happens when you go to depositaccounts.com?
You deposit stuff in your accounts?
Oh, that's so close. You find out that brick and mortar bank you've been banking at might not have the best interest rates. In fact, I just pulled it up, depositaccounts.com, and today you'll want to go there yourself to see what rates are when this actually airs, because we're a few days before. But listen to this. The national average on a savings account, 0.49%. But when depositaccounts.com looked at over 275,000 different deposit rates from over 11,000 banks and credit unions, top 1% of those is 4.9%. So instead of 0.49, if you get up there to the top 1%, 4.9%. CDs, a 1-year CD, national average, 4%. Top 1% is 5.71. That number's gone up significantly over the last few weeks. Anyway, head to depositaccounts.com and you can compare what you're getting to what the top places in the nation are paying. All right, let's dive into the second half of this. And what I'd love to do is let's get tactical now, guys. A basic piece of advice for getting out of debt. Bernadette, you have taught a ton of people how to get out of debt. So let's start with you. Basic tip for somebody who's listening right now to begin that road to getting out of debt.
So the first step that I would tell anyone is, before you even pay off debt, is to just have 1 month's emergency fund. And so I tell people to figure out what your housing, your transportation, your utilities, your food, and your health costs would be for 1 month, because inevitably, while you're trying to pay down debt, something will happen that will derail you or will demotivate you. And so having that contingency fund first before you start paying off any debt would be really
And I love, Bernadette, that you built that out, because what a lot of people hear when they hear 1 month is money coming in, remember there's taxes, it's what you need to live on, not what's coming in. And those can be often much different numbers. Len, let's build on that. What's another piece of basic advice for somebody trying to get out of debt?
Gosh, this one might come off as, I don't know, cavalier almost, but I would say if you can, get a second job or a side hustle and increase your income.
Yeah. No, and I want to ask you about that, Bernadette, because you were able to pay that off in such a short time. I know our friends Ty and Tal McNeely, they started selling stuff around their house, and it became a game, adding to the income stream like Len talked about. How much was increasing your income a part of your strategy?
Was a huge part of it in the first part of it, because I didn't know how I could make more money at the time. I was working a full-time day job, and I didn't have a lot of other skill sets that I thought I could monetize. And so I did the same thing. I went and started selling stuff from my house. And I also, my husband, here's a fun fact, he started doing extra work on TV. And so like if you watch like old seasons of like Homeland or some of these HBO shows, you'll see this guy in the background. That's him. And he would get paid like $15 an hour, but he would have probably done it for free, but we put it towards our debt instead.
Yeah, so he's having fun, cool. And he's making money at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And I think, when people talk about side hustling, I love that Len said that, because it's that advice has kind of fallen out of favor lately. A lot of people have talked about like the anti-hustle culture. But at the end of the day, if you don't have enough income to cover, what you want to do in terms of like aggressively paying down debt, like there's no shame in going and getting a retail job, like something that's easy to do.
No, once you've locked down your expenses, sometimes it just is an income problem, and I love the phrase, you can't shrink your way to greatness. Correct. I just love that quote. OG, let's build on Bernadette's advice and Len's. Simple advice, basic piece of advice, starter advice to get out of debt.
I think the biggest thing is that you have to recognize that everything's on the table. Once you make the decision that you don't want debt in your life anymore, and now you're committed to making it work, I think you have to recognize that every single solitary piece of money has to be counted. Everything has to be on the table. It doesn't mean that doesn't mean like Dave Ramsey's like, oh, you got to go sell the house, sell the car, sell the kids, all that sort of stuff like he says. But you have to be open to the fact that there's going to have to be some changes in your life. And if you start from the thought process of everything counts and I'm going to build it up from scratch the way that I want it, you've got a much better likelihood of being successful.
Let's go to more advanced advice then, Bernadette. So a more advanced piece of advice to maybe speed up the train.
So the beginner advice that people often hear in paying off debt is the debt snowball, right? So paying from lowest to highest balance, regardless of interest. And generally, I'm a fan of it because it just helps you build momentum. But the advanced version that I teach people is what I call the peaceful debt snowball, which is taking that list first. And I'm piggybacking off of what Len said earlier, knowing yourself. Right? And saying, okay, well, here's the initial list. This is the list from lowest to highest in terms of balances. But then do I need to make trades on this list to push things up higher in the list that would help me sleep better at night? Mm-hmm. So a prime example I had recently was I had a client who had over, several $100,000 of debt, everything from student loans to credit cards, car payments, and then debts that personal loans from family members. And it was around this time during the holidays that we did the list from lowest to highest balance. But then I asked her, well, what do we need to put on top of the list that's going to help you sleep better at night? She's like, I would really love to go to Thanksgiving and Christmas and not have to look at my cousin in the eye and know that I still owe them money. So we moved that up, even though it was zero interest and it wasn't the lowest balance and it didn't make sense in either of those rules of thumb. But for her, she felt so much better going into the holidays, knowing that she could eat her mashed potatoes in peace.
Well, and what's interesting about that is that, the whole debt snowball thing is about building confidence. And that gave her the confidence, like it was doing the same thing the snowball does.
Exactly. And for her, she was able to stick to it longer because we got that thing that was out of the way that was really like keeping her up at night. And I think for everyone, that's where the advanced advice comes in, whereas like you have to know what actually really matters to you, and you're likely to stick to it longer if you're actually doing it according to like what is going to motivate you.
That's fabulous. Len, a more advanced piece of advice for people trying to get out of debt?
Well, if you have a lot of credit card debt and you have multiple credit cards, do balance if you can do balance transfers and if you can and transfer your debt, your higher interest debt, into cards that have lower interest. So at least that way you will cut back on the interest expense that you are paying. I think that's kind of advanced.
Well, no, I think it is too. And you'll see a lot of people don't give beginners that strategy specifically because people that are beginners think that solves your problem. And I think it's advanced because you just know that it speeds it up. So you got to have that, still have that pit in your stomach before you do that says, I still need to be focused on this.
You have to be committed. Exactly. You have to be committed to getting rid of your debt. Otherwise, all you've done is you've just said, oh, look, I've got more, I can spend more now. So yes, correct.
Yeah. I love that specifically as an example because that's very dangerous for beginners. And it's fantastic if you're advanced. Like you look at any CFO in the country, that's what they spend their day doing is rearranging the debt for the company. OG, how about you? Another one?
Both of these are really good. The only thing that I can add to that is using your other resources as leverage to help pay off the debt. It doesn't work as great nowadays because of the way interest rates are, but still your interest rates on a home equity loan or the interest rates on a loan against your investment account, for example, is going to be a lot more favorable than a loan against, a credit card loan. The downside, of course, is that you start leveraging other things. If you don't have the discipline built in there and you say, okay, I'm going to take all my credit cards and roll them into my house, you just took an asset that was protected and now you just gave it risk. You had your house, paid off, for example, or you had, one loan on your house and maybe $100,000 of credit cards, which are unsecured. They can, you can make those go away just by not paying them. And, they're not going to come get your house. But now you rolled into your house or you tie it to your investment account and do, an asset loan or, a business loan or some sort of other asset that you have that you're going to use to borrow against. And you add another huge layer of risk associated with that. So if you're not confident in your abilities to pay that stuff off, or you don't have a good system, then I would say not to do that.
Joe, it occurs to me when I listen to Len and Bernadette and OG talk about mental approaches to this, it makes me think of the chicken who asked the pig or suggested to the pig, hey, let's start a breakfast restaurant. And the pig said, well, easy for you to say. And the chicken's like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, yeah, you're motivated, but I'm committed.
That's true,
right? Like, how committed are you to these ideas? Because the pig gets one shot at it. Right? The chicken just keeps on pumping out eggs.
Yes,
the pig is committed. And how committed are you to this, to really reducing your debt?
Well, and I think, guys, this is a great example because all of a lot of that advanced advice will get you there quicker, but it will also way slow you down. And I've seen so many people tripped up because they started with these advanced strategies. I'm going to throw one more on the table, which is a lot of people. I've talked a lot about how important communication is in your budget, whether communication with yourself, meaning that you're using, apps or resource or some type of a tool, and then you set aside time to look at this and to focus on it and to watch that work. But what I often find is that people overdo the tool and they will, we're going to meet every day for 45 minutes and it's going to be whatever, like this Camp David summit for the whole family. And then pretty soon you're not talking about your money at all because you're so sick of it. But I do think that experimenting with apps and using communication and setting up a good pace is really a good advanced piece of this as well. Let's move over to retirement. Bernadette, we'll start with you again. But good basic tip, saving for retirement.
Good basic tip I tell people is to do $28 a day. And
$28 a day.
Yeah, $28 a day. It's actually $28.40. If you did that every day for a year, you'd have $10,000.
Isn't that funny how you take a number like 10 grand that sounds so huge and you break it up to $30 and you go, oh, I think I could do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I tell people just, if you can find $28, whether it's, not getting Paramount Plus or I don't know, or, selling something for $28, most people feel a lot more motivated thinking like, okay, that's doable versus like exactly what you said, $10,000 feels like it's a mountain.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Len, a great basic piece of advice.
I think a few we've already discussed earlier on. I mean, the 3% match or 5% or whatever your company match do that. But since we've already done that, if you just want a fun little trick for saving, and one of my readers brought this up, and she's not the only one, but what she took is every time she got a $5 bill, the rule was a $5 bill that came into her possession went into savings immediately. So then that was just that was a fun way to save money, a little extra on the side, real basic, but hey, it guaranteed that every time you came into some of that, a $5 bill, you're going to save some money. So I know that's very basic, but hey, that's what you get for basic.
No, you know what?
Stack of fives. That's a good idea.
A big thing on TikTok right now is the 100 envelope challenge that you see. You get these 100 little spots, and you put money in each of them, and you put different numbers on each of them. And Len, to your point, you just try to fill all these different things over whatever the course of time is. For a lot of people, it's a year, and you save a bunch of additional money doing that.
Yeah, and it's thousands. I can't remember how much this lady saved, but it was thousands of dollars in a few years just by saving $5 bills. So it does work.
Can I give the millennial upgrade of Len's?
Yes.
I was just thinking about it because I was just like, I don't think I've ever gotten a $5 bill ever, like recently or ever, because I never carried cash. So how would I do this? And so my millennial take on it would be, whenever people transfer you money on Venmo, instead of transferring it back to your cash or whatever, just transfer it into your IRA.
There you go.
Len has no idea what Venmo is.
Oh, no, I do.
Yes.
That's a good one, Bernadette.
Auntie Bernadette, meet Uncle Len.
Yeah, exactly.
OG, good basic tip for saving for retirement.
Yeah, I mean, I can't get past the just put money in your retirement plan at work to the match, and don't touch it for 45 years. Like, that's really the simplest thing that you can do.
I'm going to add mine, which is, I think, especially when you start out, you overthink, what do I invest in? Find a good wide index. Put the money in that wide index, specifically like a total market index when you begin, and you're going to be completely diversified. You're in stocks, which are going to go up or down, but you know what? With a long time frame, that's where you want to be. And so don't overthink it when you start. Don't overthink the asset allocation. Just get started. Get started. Let's go more advanced then, Bernadette. More advanced, a 201 strategy for retirement savers.
So my 201 strategy, building on what OG said here, is to go up to the maximum you can contribute in a year in your 401k, and let that be your goal instead of opening up other accounts. Because I see a lot of people who are opening up Acorns or Robinhood or all this other stuff, and they think that they've maxed out because they said, oh, I put up to the match, so I've maxed out. And they don't understand that actually you can put more than just the match, and you're just simplifying how many accounts you have to track over time. And so putting upwards of $20,000 is not an easy feat for most people. And so that would be an advanced way of still keeping things relatively simple, but just making the goal be the actual IRS contribution limit and not just the match.
Well, the thing that I love about that too is there's another implied thing, which is so many people, as you know, I want to have an account here, so that I get, all these buckets. But to your point, Bernadette, I think the more advanced thing is you got to have a dashboard. You got to be able to see what the hell you got. Like if you've got money in 50 different pockets, it's difficult to know where the hell you're going.
That's absolutely right. And I would say too, a lot of people, in 2020, 2021, everyone is talking about dollar cost averaging, like, oh, it's this like amazing strategy, right? And I've had to tell my clients, I'm like, do you know that just by putting your money in your 401k and your paycheck, you're automatically doing dollar cost averaging? Like you don't even have to think about it. So just do that instead of trying to dollar cost average some other account.
It's automatic. It's fantastic. Len, a 201.
Instead of focusing, I know a lot of people, they'll focus on just indices. They'll focus on the Dow or the Russell or the NASDAQ and things like that. And that's good. And you diversify that way. But start thinking about ways to diversify even further than that. Break into things like sectors, energy sectors, or, food sectors, things like Arthur Daniels, Midland, stuff like that. Utilities, different types of commodities, and do your research and kind of decide for yourself which ones are underinvested in and which ones where investments will be needed in the future. Start looking deeper into ways to really get into diversification and break things down rather than just into the higher level indices.
Actually, I'm going to piggyback off that, Len, because my advanced one was going to be the kind of the 201 of what I said in the first round, which is begin to worry about your asset allocations much more specifically when the amount of the technical word I think is jiggle. The amount of jiggle in your portfolio on a daily basis matters more than what you put in. That's when it makes sense to actually then get away from just putting money in a broad index and starting to think about what really fits my goal better. Like that. Save that for later. I think all the people on Wall Street use the term jiggle.
Did you go to the bar down by the airport again, Joe?
To see some jiggle
in the broad.
Oh man. OG, how about you? Bring us back.
I'll reel us back in here. So mine's kind of like a two-part one. Just sticking on retirement planning and retirement savings. If you don't have the opportunity to contribute to the maximum, that 22,500 or soon to be 23, I think next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Set up the automatic escalation every single 6 months of 1%, 2%, whatever, and you will never miss it. You will eventually max it out and you'll be fine. And so that's kind of phase one of that. And then phase two is just because you got to 22,000 or 23 doesn't mean you're done. You can start doing, excess contributions if your plan allows it beyond the maximum to really start kind of putting your foot on the gas pedal from a tax-free accumulation. This is the ubiquitous mega
backdoor
Roth. The mega Doug's mom.
They're still allowing the backdoor Roth. I thought they were trying to get rid of that backdoor Roth.
There was a movement for a minute, maybe a year and a half ago, but it's still there.
Okay.
Man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hammer down. If you can do Doug's mom, get after it.
Okay.
No.
What? Isn't that what we decided to?
That is what we decided. Bernadette is an old joke, but
you don't know what we.
But the mega backdoor Roth, we just hate that name, so we came up with a new name. And whenever we say mega backdoor Roth, instead we decided we'd say Doug's mom. So
okay.
Yeah. Yes. And it isn't any better. It should have been something better, but we couldn't come up with anything better. So, all right.
But anyway, that's my major one. If you get a chance to do Doug's mom, have at it. No. No.
Hi, Doug's mom, by the way. I've never met you before, but
no. She's a sweet lady. She's a very nice lady and doesn't deserve any of this. She listens to
every episode and hates OG.
Doug deserves every second of this. His mom deserves none. I think that's a horrible place to leave it, but you know what? I think we are going to leave it right there. Let's find out what's happening where each of you are. December holidays, OG. What are you guys doing this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely nothing. Watching the Army-Navy game. Go Navy. Beat Army.
Right. We're going to have our guest of honor go last. Mr. Penzo, what's coming up at lenpenzo.com?
Hey, you know what I'm going to bring up? It's one that's a few years old now, but I did an article. It was well received. Got a lot of comments on financial rules of thumb. I think it's apropos considering what we were talking about today. So, come on by lenpenzo.com and you can see, I think I've got about 15 rules of thumb and for the most part, reasons why they're not necessarily good to take as gospel.
Love it. I will always fight for the fact that you don't need rules of thumb. It's not that much harder to begin with your own goal. And it's so much better and it's so much stickier. It's so much more fun. And frankly, you're smart enough to take that approach. Bernadette, thanks so much. I'll apologize for these yahoos, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And this weekend, I'm actually writing my first chapter of my book is due this weekend. So I'll do nothing but writing. But funny enough, I'm writing about 25 money habits that I think people can use to get started. So not the advanced stuff, the beginner stuff. And so hopefully that'll be helpful for people in the future.
Well, you definitely have to come back, and you definitely have to come back when the book's released, because we need to dive into some of that with our stackers, because it's great stuff. For now, though, let's talk about the podcast. What's coming up?
So we actually just finished this season 6, with my co-host Steph Gonzalez, and we are looking forward to getting more people in the new year who's going to talk more about advanced strategies, particularly around investing. So in 2024, look out for more advanced talk around investing for people who are wanting to retire early.
Well, you know what this does too? This gives everybody a chance to catch up. All our stackers that don't know the show yet can catch up, and you're on every platform, right? Wherever they're listening to us now.
Wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can listen to the Crush Your Money Goals podcast, and we go by season. So we like to have binge-worthy type of stuff, so you can binge us all in like a couple days, maybe for the holidays.
That's fabulous. And we'll link to it in the show notes, as we will Len's post, and won't be linking to the Army-Navy game, but we'll all be.
Why not?
Yes, we will. Well, Kevin, make sure you link to the Army-Navy game. All right. That's going to do it for today.
He felt a little mobby there. He's like, why won't you? I just... You should have done the mob voice again.
Doug, bring us home, man. What's our to-dos from today's episode?
You know what? Well, first we had a to-do mid-episode, Joe, because I reached out to our audit firm that we use, Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, and they looked into our trivia scores just to confirm. And we have confirmed that going into last week's Friday Roundtable episode, Len was 3 points ahead of OG. And then in that episode, it was a game show episode, so there were 2 points available. And OG, yes, you captured both points, but that brought you 1 point behind Len, as we correctly reported at the beginning of our trivia segment. So, yeah, you're screwed.
Got 2 weeks left.
All we needed was the end of that sentence. OG, you're screwed.
Okay, so let's get back to our to-do list. Well, Joe, first, take some advice from Bernadette Joy and consider maxing out your 401k contributions up to the IRS limit so you can eat your mashed potatoes with peace of mind. Second, take some advice from OG and realize that when you're trying to right your ship, absolutely everything is on the table. That means, yes, you're going to have to sell your bitchin' Camaro and possibly your firstborn. Look, I don't make the rules. But what's on my to-do list? I got to take out an insurance policy on myself in case I'm ever kidnapped by 3 people I know. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Joe, Len, and OG. Thanks to Bernadette Joy for joining us today. You can find all things Bernadette on her podcast, Crush Your Money Goals, wherever you're listening to us right now. We'll also include links in our show notes at stackingbenjamins.com because OG yelled at us to do so. Thanks also to Len Penzo for joining us today. You can find Len at lenpenzo.com/what's Venmo. Thanks also to OG for joining us today. Looking for good financial planning help? Head to stackingbenjamins.com/OG for his calendar. This show is the property of SB Podcasts, LLC, copyright 2023, and is created by Joe Saul-Sehy. Our producer is Karen Repine. This show was written by Lisa Curry, who's also the host of the Long Story Long podcast, with help from me, Joe, and Doc G from the Earn and Invest podcast. Kevin Bailey helps us take a deeper dive into all the topics covered on each episode in our newsletter called The 201. You'll find the 411 on all things money at the 201. Just visit stackingbenjamins.com/201. Wonder how beautiful we all are? Of course you'll never know if you don't check out our YouTube version of this show, engineered by Tina Eichenberg. Then you'll see once and for all that I'm the best thing that ever happened to this show. Once we bottle up all this goodness, we ship it to our engineer, the amazing Steve Stewart. Steve helps the rest of our team sound nearly as good as I do right now. Want to chat with friends about the show later? Of course you do! Mom's friend Gertrude and Kate Youngkin are our social media coordinators, and Gertrude is the room mother in our Facebook group called The Basement. So say hello when you see us posting online. To join all the basement fun with other stackers, type stackingbenjamins.com/basement. Not only should you not take advice from these nerds, don't take advice from people you don't know. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any financial decisions, speak with a real financial advisor. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor Doug, and we'll see you next time back here at the Stacking Benjamin Show. Memes that shows up all the time is a clip from Steve Carell in The Office where he's like, sometimes I just start sentences and I see where it takes me. Like, I don't know what words are coming next. And I hate those because half of those I'm like, oh shit, I'm that guy. Like I am the idiot that Steve Carell portrayed in The Office.
That's funny. That's awesome. You're like, I can, yeah. I feel like they're looking at me.
God, imagine if you didn't have a script for me, Joe, where this would go half the time.
I'll be right back.
Now I feel like we've got, as our special guest, Bernadette Joy and her microphone. Because it's just like so prominent.
It's so my
It
microphone.
looks like they're sitting next to each other.
It looks like the star of the show. It really does.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because my camera automatically like picks up on it too, and just like puts me as like the blurry background.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and we got Bernadette.
And me, yeah.
You know what, Bernadette? What you need to do is you need to put like two little felt eyes and a nose and a smiley face on the top of that Yeti right there.
You know what? That's actually.
I want to go do that now.
I'm
too.
literally gonna go do that
geez.
today.
Totally should. Oh
I'm
my
gonna
God.
get those googly eyes and that mustache nose. It's a great idea.
Oh my God, we're gonna have a fun hour.